Welcome to Q&A Selling Online, with answers to questions about creating an online empire, promoting products, or building a brand. Your host, private label and e-commerce entrepreneur, Quinn Amorm.
Welcome back to the show, my friends. Today we have with us a very special guest directly from China, Mitch Johnson from V-Trust Inspection Service. Mitch, how's it going today?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
Doing great. So besides the cold weather, I don't have a cold, but cold weather here, it's the only thing that's really bothering me. You are in China. How's the weather there?
Pretty good, actually. We're in the south in Guangzhou, so we're near Hong Kong. So today, in Celsius, it's about 25, 26 degrees.
Wow.
Fahrenheit, probably close to 80. So we're not doing so bad.
Yeah. So that's almost 50-degree difference between me and you. So yeah, that's paradise.
Yeah.
All right. So you are in China, like we just said. How long have you been there, and are you living there? You live there full time?
Yeah. I've been in China for about 9 years now. I lived in Beijing for 2 years, and then that was a bit too chilly, so I moved down south to Guangzhou. So I've been in Guangzhou for about 7 years now.
Wow, that is so cool. So how did you get started, and how did you end up there? Tell us our story.
Let's see. After university, I wasn't sure exactly if I wanted to continue to graduate school or start working. But what really sounded interesting was learning to live in another country for a while. So I came to China with another friend and started working here for a bit. And 1 year led to another year, and still here. So wasn't really planned this way, but that's the way it turned out.
Okay, so I know the feeling. I know the feeling. Like we spoke earlier, I went to Portugal once to, I don't know if it was for vacation or what, but I ended up spending 20 years there, right? And
nice long vacation.
Exactly, right. So you are with V-Trust. So tell us, what is V-Trust and what do you guys do?
Right. Yeah. So V-Trust is an independent inspection company or third-party inspection. So we provide a couple of services. We focus mostly on like product inspections. So we can essentially visit the factory on behalf of a buyer and inspect the quality of an order to make sure it conforms to the requirements, there are no defects. And then after issuing the report, the buyer can decide if they want to accept the order or negotiate with the supplier to change it a bit.
Okay.
So we started in about 2006, been growing quite a lot, especially this year, obviously with this year and last year. With the pandemic, nobody can really travel that much. So no one can come here to check their own orders, to check the factories. So we've been doing a lot of that, especially for Amazon sellers in the past year and a half.
Yeah, I bet that has exploded the amount of inspections they have to do. So can you explain how an inspection works and what gets done? And is there a difference between inspection and independent assessments, or is that just another term for the same thing?
There are a couple of terms for different kinds of inspections. The ones that we provide, the two most common are during production, which obviously is in the middle of production. At that point, we'll usually visit when about 30% of the production is finished. So we'll check a few of the finished items as well as some of the items that are still under production to make sure everything is going correctly, everything's on schedule. And then the other one that's the most popular is pre-shipment inspection, which is sometimes called final inspection. So that's after production is done 100% and at least 80% of it's packed. So at that point, we'll check total quantity, make sure the numbers are there, check the workmanship of the product, the specifications like height, length, weight, colors. If it's for Amazon FBA, we can also check a few of those things, like there's an FBA label for Amazon products. We can check if that's readable. Any logos, marking, labeling, also packing. If FBA is the destination, then they require certain packing things, maybe for your poly bag, etc. And then for any additional requirements that you have, we can add that to our checklist. So we'll check all of those things, put it into a report, and then the client will get that about 12 to 24 hours after the inspection is finished. And they can see how many defects were present, whether we recommend accepting or rejecting the shipment.
Okay, got it. So you mentioned the pre-shipment or a factory or one done in the factory. So the pre-shipment, I'm guessing, is if I'm buying from a trading company, then it has to be a pre-shipment, right? That's the only option.
It kind of depends because trading companies, they source from different factories, and sometimes they reveal which factory that comes from. Sometimes they don't. We recommend having the inspection at the factory itself, just so if there are some problems, they can fix it there on site, rather than being shipped back from a warehouse to the factory and back and forth.
Yeah,
so
got
it depends on the agreement you have with your supplier.
Yeah, I did hear some stories in the past that people that have bought a large quantity of something, and after they get it inspected, after it's all done, they get it inspected and it fails the inspection. And now the entire order is done, so it's too late to stop it, right? You would have to redo it all. Right. So the way you do it sounds pretty fantastic, because you can go to the factory while it's being produced. So if you have that authority, I'm guessing, if you're there and they're producing it and it is wrong, can you ask them to stop right away?
We can't ask the factory to do anything because we're not a party to the original contract, but we can recommend to the buyer to ask the factory to do that.
Okay, got it.
We can make recommendations to the factory, but we don't have any authority to actually force them to do that.
Got it.
So that's why, we usually ask for maybe an emergency contact number, so we can call the buyer during the inspection just in case there's something really major that comes up, and then they can contact their supplier and figure out what's going to be the best way to solve that issue.
Okay, so I read that in 2020, you guys alone had over 100,000 man days in China. Man days is a workday for a full workday, correct?
Correct. Different companies will define that slightly differently. The way we define it is up to 8 hours on site. Yeah. So that does not include travel time and report writing time. But you have to be careful about that, because some companies will include their travel time within the man day. So if they spend 2 hours traveling there, 2 hours traveling back, they'll only spend 6 hours on site. So it's good to be clear about that up front with whoever you contract, because it's not always consistent.
Okay, that's one of the things that most buyers, which Amazon sellers that are in this case being buyers, probably don't think about that, right? There are huge travel times sometimes. So
good rule of thumb is never assume anything.
Yeah, I like that one. Yeah. So 100,000 man days. That's and it wasn't just in China, right? So you guys do China, Vietnam, India, Cambodia. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, cool. Southeast Asia, most of Southeast Asia and China. China's our biggest area, but last year was absolutely our busiest year yet.
So
in large part thanks to the pandemic. Yeah.
How big is the team, Mitch?
We've got about 100 people in our head office here, and then we have just over 350 inspectors, full-time inspectors, spread out all over. So in any of our network, we can send our own full-time inspectors there, so we can make sure everything is standardized. We can keep an eye on things, make sure it's consistent, reliable.
Nice. Pretty soon to be a 500-man company. That's pretty decent volume, right? Pretty decent size.
Yeah.
So how do those, let's say those 350 inspectors, how do they get trained? Is this in-person training? Do they hands-on, or is it still like some online training?
Yeah, that's a good question, especially given the past year. So our inspectors, we require them to have at least 2 years of some kind of related experience to QC. And then when they join our team, they come to our head office. So from all over China, they'll come here for usually it's 2 weeks of in-house training. And then we've also mixed in 1 or 2 weeks of online training, as well as several months of on-site training before they're independent inspectors. So we try to keep it pretty comprehensive, give them some hands-on experience, as well as classroom training. And then we have periodic assessments and additional training modules that we can send out throughout the year as well.
Okay, got it. And now, one of the things that I often think about, because it has happened in the past, and luckily not to me yet, but I know there are companies out there that have a lot of certificates, and some of those certificates are not real certificates. So is that something that your team or your company also does, like inspect a certificate to make sure it is real?
Yeah. So for example, let's say a business license of a factory. There is an online database in China through the government where you can check the business license to make sure that their business scope is what they say it is. So if they say, yes, we can manufacture chairs, but actually their business scope says maybe, plastic home decor. It's not exactly what they're certified to do. Because they will say, we can do this, we can do that for you, anything you want, but the official business certificate doesn't lie. So as far as other certificates like quality control certificates or certifications by like a social compliance platform, we can check the authenticity of those.
Okay, and now an important thing, when every day there's new and Amazon sellers, hundreds or thousands every single day that come on. And a lot of these sellers, when they become buyers, right? In this case, they go to China and buy their products. They don't know anything or much about product compliance, right? So they can buy something that they won't be allowed to sell. Is that something that just because they don't know, that the factory will still sell it to them, right? Is that something that you guys look into and like tell me, hey, Quinn, by the way, do you know that you can't sell that unless you have this and this?
We try to as best as we can. It's a lot of things to keep track of because every country, even states within the U.S. itself, they all have slightly different regulations. Like California has CA 65. Even if it's transported through California, it has to either comply with that or have a label saying it may not comply. So yeah, we usually try to identify where the product is going to be sold, if possible. And we can offer, do you need this certification? If you're going to sell it in California or the US, do you need that certification? But the problem is, kind of like you said, a lot of sellers are not aware of this. Yeah. And they may or may not have done their homework already. So sometimes, even if we ask, do you need this certification? They might just assume that they don't because they haven't heard of it before. So I think that is one of the challenges for new Amazon sellers because they just haven't been exposed to a lot of those things before. However, most of the new Amazon sellers that we've been getting, it seems like most of them have some idea of that because first they're coming to us for inspections. So they've probably heard about some of this through maybe their Amazon schools or a podcast or like a prominent Amazon seller. And so they have already looked into some of these things. They may not know exactly how to do it, but they're at least aware of it. So we do get requests for certifications like that as well.
And is it still possible to source things that are, let's say, supplements, anything that it's ingestible? Those are a little bit more serious, right? Does that require? Do you have different members of a team to go to do supplement inspections, or everybody's trained for the same for everything?
We do have different departments that focus on different product lines. So like soft line, hard line, agricultural, things like that. We also have a testing division that handles lab testing. So for example, supplements, that's going to need some FDA clearance in addition to the regular custom things. So we do have different departments dedicated to different areas so that we can make sure that this particular requirement is well taken care of, rather than just by a general responsibility type person.
Okay, so I read you guys invested, VTrust invested over $2.5 million into your own labs. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, you've been reading a bit of our website, huh?
Yeah, that's cool. Normally, I figured everything would be outsourced to another lab or another business, and so you guys do everything. That's why you have a team of 450, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of companies often outsource, often by necessity. But yeah, we've worked pretty hard to develop our lab testing abilities, since it's such a huge supplemental area to inspections and quality control. So we try to be, kind of like a one-stop kind of quality control service.
Okay, so let's say a brand new buyer orders something. They do the standard that people do is pay 30% up front, and then the last 70 after the inspection is approved. That is still what you see, right? The 30-70 in most cases.
That's most common, yeah.
Yeah. So this brand new seller, if they say contact VTrust to get the inspection, what do they need to tell? Let's say if they're talking to you, what do they need, information they need to give you? They just give you the seller, the manufacturer, and then you deal with them, or how does it go?
Right. Yeah. So when they're making a booking, we will communicate directly with their supplier so we can coordinate the schedule, find out when production is going to be finished. So there's less people in the middle. But essentially, the information that we need is total quantity of the order, total number of items. So if there are different SKUs within that order. And usually a reference photo of the item is helpful too, so we can estimate how long it's going to take to inspect sample size for that order. So we don't usually inspect every single item. It's not very efficient. It takes a long time. So we'll follow something called the AQL. It's an international standard for quality control. So we'll take a corresponding sample size from your order size, inspect that according to our checklist, and based on how many defects there are, we'll, like I said before, recommend pass or fail. So besides that, we need the contact person at the factory. So we can call them. They already know which order that we're talking about, and we'll coordinate with them. Once we confirm the inspection date, we'll notify the buyer, tell them this is when the inspection is going to happen. You can expect the report at this time, and you can make a decision on whether to release the order or not.
And Mitch, how do you guys verify colors? Because I know, for example, if I send you a picture, the color may not be realistic because of the lighting or something. So do you use like color codes?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of buyers maybe don't consider this. We get a mix. Usually most reliable is to have a standard like Pantone colors. So when you're going through these things with your supplier, choose a color code from, like, for example, Pantone or something equivalent. That way we can take our own Pantone pack and compare the color with the finished product. It's different, like you said, different displays and cameras show colors slightly differently. So it's kind of hard to compare through a computer screen.
Okay, because I've known in the past people that have received colors that they weren't expecting. And I tell everybody, you don't just tell your manufacturer what color you want, you show them, right? You show them what color you want, because a green to me, it may not be the same green for you, right? A fluorescent green is still green, right? Yeah. So yeah, make sure
that's a good example. Because even if you choose a Pantone color, from a swatch, you may not know exactly what to expect with the finished product. So it's also good to pair that with an approved sample. If your supplier can provide a sample for you and you can approve everything about it, that's your best way to make sure you're going to get what you ordered. If that sample can also be sent to your inspector so they can compare it side by side on site, that's going to be your best bet for making sure it's correct.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. Can I get the sample sent to you instead of sending it to me, right? It would probably save a couple of days, and you're right there. So,
right. Okay. It's good to plan in advance. If your supplier can send you some samples, you approve them, and then maybe if the supplier can send one sample to us in our office, we can take that with us to the inspection and compare it to make sure it's all consistent.
So what are some of the most common mistakes that you see? I often want to say sellers, but in this case, they're buyers. Right. What is the most common mistakes do you see them do?
Probably there are 2 or 3 very common ones, especially that I've seen in the past year with a lot of new people coming in. One is a lot of the new Amazon sellers that we get coming in. They want to do the responsible thing and check off the QC box, which is great. So they'll book an inspection, but then they just assume that it's going to go well. And they have their shipment date scheduled for 1 day later, right after the inspection. So honestly, more often than not, it doesn't go as planned because there might be a failed inspection. There could be an unanticipated defect or just a non-conformity that has to be dealt with. So then, the buyer, the Amazon seller's in a tough spot. They've got to decide, do I just ship this order as is, accept these things that I didn't want, or do I cancel the shipment and try to reschedule it later while the supplier reworks these products? It's not a good position to be in. There could even be like, maybe you chose a product out of catalog and you said, I want this exactly like that. But maybe you didn't specify the material of some components. And you only find out later at the end of production that it's not the material you thought it was going to be. They can't fix that in 6 hours before your shipment. So we usually recommend trying to schedule your inspection 3 days before shipment so that if, worst comes to worst, there are a few days to fix it up before shipping it out. And you don't have to deal with rescheduling shipment.
Okay, so when you go to a manufacturing facility to do an inspection, imagine this probably happens to you a lot. I order, let's say a microphone from a company, but I get the packaging from a different company. I don't know if all sellers do this. I often get those two manufacturers speaking to each other. So let's say the packaging manufacturer makes them, ships them to the microphone guy. That's just an example. And then he has them there with my branding and everything. So if you go to factory B, would you inspect my boxes from factory A as well?
Usually that's okay. Yeah. If it's if there's not like a hugely complicated packaging, that's usually fine. Especially it's recommended, especially if different factory handled packaging versus the actual product. We have seen instances where the final product did not actually fit the packaging because those two factories didn't communicate well. So yeah, as long as we can fit it into the same man day, that's fine. We can include packaging within the checklist. It's part of our normal checklist anyway. And just make sure that you communicate all of these things to your supplier well in advance, because like what we said before, don't assume anything. It's true. You need to tell your supplier exactly what you want down to the finest detail that you can so that they know what you want. Otherwise, they're going to assume that this cheaper component is okay or this thin packaging is okay because you didn't ask for anything else. So it's important to not only tell your inspector what to check for, but to specify everything, including Amazon FBA requirements to your supplier in advance. So there's no surprises for anybody later on.
Yeah. Absolutely. So what you mentioned there about sometimes the final product not fitting in the packaging, that is the reason why I get, for example, two manufacturers speaking to each other so they can figure that out. Because it has happened in the past where the final product ends up not fitting in the box, and that's a big issue, right? So and then it's supposed to board the sea can tomorrow, right? That's always the case. So tell me, I did check your site because it's a really good looking site, and I like the orange tones on it and everything, but you have a lot of things there. So what else does VTrust do?
Besides product inspections, we can do factory audits. So essentially, we visit the factory, check their certificates to make sure they manufacture what they say they manufacture, check their production facilities to make sure their machines are, for example, clean, well taken care of. They have the manpower necessary to produce your size of order by the date they promised, see what they outsource, if anything. We can also do something called a social audit. This may not be that familiar for Amazon sellers, but it's bigger for large retailers, for example, Walmart. Mm-hmm. So this checks for things like child labor, forced labor, wages paid on time, environmental responsibility. So we also check those things as well. And then also, we kind of mentioned it before, testing and certification for products. So those are the main areas that we generally focus on.
Okay, got it. I did hear about the social inspection before. I wasn't too sure what it was. I just assumed basically that's what it was. Yeah.
Right.
Now, one of the things that some Amazon sellers, or again, in this case, buyers, may think is, how do we know we can trust the inspection company to go to a place and actually be on my side, right? Not be, because they're going to be there in the factory. And what if the factory says, why don't you let this slide, right? How do we know this? I bet you've probably been asked this before.
Right. Yeah, it's a common concern and it's a valid concern. So for one, you want to look for an inspection company that has full accreditation. And within China, there are three main accreditations. They all have acronyms. One is IFIA, another is AQSIQ, and the third, I'm actually forgetting the actual, CNAS, sorry, CNAS. So an inspection company to be fully accredited must have those three things. But for an average person, a new Amazon seller, that probably doesn't mean a whole lot to them practically. So the issue of, let's say, bribery. If a inspector finds a big problem and the factory asks, can you just ignore this or check it off the list, and there's a pack of cash waiting for you. It's a concern, it's a valid concern, and it's something that we take very seriously. So one of the ways that we take care of that is we only use our own full-time inspectors. That's the first step to making sure we can supervise what's going on. Second, we also want to not just tell people we're watching you, that kind of thing, but also to provide incentive to do a good job. All of our inspectors are, they stay here for a long time. They have good compensation, and also after being in the company for a long time, as well as doing a good job, they have the opportunity to become shareholders of the company. Nice. So we try to provide a strong incentive for inspectors to maintain transparency, do a good job, and not take bribes. Be on the side of the buyer who contracts us, so that they have a strong reason to turn down that bribe, because literally it's better for them to do a professional job, to make sure that the buyer's interests are well taken care of. So whenever you're looking at an inspection company, whether it's us or someone else, visit the company if you have the opportunity, see how they handle these kinds of things. Because anyone with a serious program to take care of this, they're going to have usually a detailed program to address it because it's a well-known issue. And if they don't have a very detailed answer, they just say, oh, we take it seriously and we make sure that our inspectors are professional. There's no detail there. You can't really verify that they're going to be reliable. So look for the system that they have in place. That's very important.
Okay. Another clue. Well, I'm not too sure if this is, but in my mind, I always look for somebody that's been for a few years in business, right? Because if they were doing things that they shouldn't do, pretty soon they will run out of business. And so if they've been in business for many years, though, that means that company has been doing something right.
Right.
Is that what you think too?
That's usually a pretty good indicator, not just for inspection companies, but for factories also.
Yeah.
Usually, like when we're looking at factories, if they've only been established for a year, 6 months, or maybe less than 2 years, that can be a bit of a red flag if they haven't been established for a long time. So yeah, usually successful companies are in business for a while. It doesn't guarantee it's going to be good, but it's definitely a very good first start. And it's good to be wary if that one doesn't check the box.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mitch, one of the things that your company is, I'm assuming that your company is asked the most is probably, how much is this going to cost me? So what's the average 1 day inspection? If it's like a, what do you call it? A man day, a full man day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have a flat fee of $268 US. And this fee is for everything. It's all inclusive. So travel fees, hotel fees, all of that is already included in that price. So you're not going to be hit with hidden fees later. And again, kind of like what we mentioned with the man days earlier, some companies will include this in their quote, some will not. So, with our man days, it's up to 8 hours on site. The price includes, everything involved, the report. You're not going to end up paying more than what we quoted. So, for example, for a lot of new people, a lot of new Amazon sellers, when they hear this, they sometimes think, it's a bit steep. I'm not sure if I really need it. But what, a lot of more experienced, like Amazon sellers or buyers in general will tell you is that if you have an order size of, let's say, maybe 1,000 units of something, and you're paying roughly, $268 for an inspection for 1 man day, that ends up being a few cents for each unit. And if it helps you to identify problems before it's shipped, that ends up saving you a lot more money in the long run, because if you didn't identify those things before they arrived in your port or in your warehouse, and then you end up having to replace defective products, ship them back overseas, or dispose of defective products, that's going to end up costing you a lot more money. So generally, it's more of an investment to protect you from not only higher costs, but huge headaches later on down the line. So compared to some of our competitors, like say SGS, Schema, it's a little bit lower than their price, and they typically do not include their travel costs within that. So when you're contracting an inspection company, make sure to ask, what does this price include? Travel, accommodation, report issuing, things like that.
Yeah. At any company I deal with, I like having the real number up front, right? I don't want to have any extras after. I rather it be a little bit higher even, but this is the number. So I like to have all my numbers ahead of time, because I like to know if everything is going to work out or not. Not just, I guess most people would be like that. So
it is a good idea to have them kind of break down the price a bit. So for example, we mentioned a bit of the checklist before. What do you check for in the inspection? So if you want, we can actually break down the time required to check each item, because we can calculate that based on the sample size and the things that we check. So we might say, for each, let's say, pen that we're inspecting, we can inspect one pen in maybe 2 or 3 minutes, depending on how complex the item is. And then from that, you can calculate, how many items can actually be finished within one day and have it done well, not just a quick once over. So a good inspection company should be able to break those things down for you if you request it.
Okay, perfect. Now, what was I going to ask you? For example, you mentioned the pen, and that reminded me that every product is different. So in the case of the pen, the person that is doing the inspection would actually use it, right? They would use the item to make sure the usability is there. Right. So what if there's an item that is, for example, rechargeable? That means it has a battery built in. Would one be tested, for example, for the durability of that battery if they say it will last 6 hours of running? Would that be tested?
Right. Yeah. So during the inspection, we can do, usually we call it a running test or a fatigue test. So for, let's say, an electric fan, a rechargeable electric fan, we will plug a few of those in, charge them for several hours to make sure they don't get too hot, make sure they actually charge to their capacity. And we'll also turn them on and run them for several hours to make sure that the actual running time is consistent with the customer's requirements, as well as like the markings on the package. Because sometimes there can be small mistakes or typos in the package markings. So the customer's requirement might be, this fan should run for 6 hours on battery. But on the package, it says 8 hours. And the actual running time might be 4 hours. So yeah, we do check for that. Function tests are important, as well as like some general safety tests for maybe sharp edges, electric shock, things like that.
Yeah, there's so much to look into because every product is a product. And you're absolutely right with what you said earlier. At the end of the day, if you have a big order, it's going to cost you, the value of the inspection is only a few cents per unit, right? And you're going to add that on it when you're selling it, right? You mark that up. And the cost of a product that lands on Amazon that is defective, I think it's about 20 times higher than if it's caught there, because now you have your markup, you have to pay the Amazon fees. The customer is unhappy. If it happens a lot, after a certain percentage, your account is at risk. And man, oh man, it's why not do it, right? It's unless, I mean, the only times I would see some sellers think it would be hard to do if they have an order of like a test order of 50 units of something, right? That now adding $280 on top of that would make that product a bit expensive. But if it is a test run, I guess you're not going to be profitable with your test run. Just get it tested anyway, right?
The test run can be very instrumental actually for your future orders, because from that you can kind of see what to expect as far as maybe common defects. You can make a list of major, minor issues that are acceptable, not acceptable. So that way, later you're less surprised by what might pop up. You can ask an inspector to watch out for this, please, or make sure that this is taken care of. In our previous order, this was an issue. So yeah, that can be used as kind of a precursor to like an approved sample. So we can also do sample checks here. So if you don't want it sent overseas, you can send it to our office. We can issue a full sample check report. So there's a lot of different ways to address that. Sample run, sample check.
Yeah. So Mitch, before I let you go, I have another question. And imagine this. There's this, and this is actually a true story, okay? So there's this manufacturer who I deal with for many years. And every inspection that was done always passed. Everything was always perfect, right? So I talked to him through Skype, and man, we talk about everything all the time because it's been years. The nicest person ever, and they never let me down. Is there a point where I can say, I don't need any more inspections? Do you think if I tell them I'm not inspecting anymore, will that relationship stand, or do I still should insist on having it?
That's a good example. I've heard a similar story actually. So I think one thing that's important to understand before this is that, problems and defects within an order, they're not usually a malicious thing. People are initially concerned about, my supplier might try to rip me off. So I want to protect against it, which can happen, but the majority of defects or, non-conformities, most of those are down to, miscommunication or misunderstanding or just not specifying enough. So your example, when you have a very long relationship with a supplier, the story that I experienced, someone told a very similar story. He had a very good supplier, very, maybe 12, 13 years relationship with this factory, producing, I believe it was vacuum cleaners. And they're very good friends with each other. They even went on vacation with each other. So there's no, malicious intent here. And, they had good quality products for a long time. But one year, they started getting bad quality shipments from this same supplier because there was a new component on the market. It was a cheaper, easier to procure component for some electronic part of this vacuum cleaner. And because the buyer did not specify exactly the component that he wanted, he just assumed that his supplier would continue giving him this good stuff. The supplier took that as implicit permission to use this cheaper component because he assumed it would do the same job as the original, but also cut costs in production. Of course, the buyer wasn't told about this until they started getting returns from their customers. So these things do happen. Technology changes. They might have a new QC guy in their department. They might, a machine could break down. So you might be able to reduce the frequency of quality inspections, but it is a good idea to, still do them from time to time to make sure that, everything is still consistent. Nothing has actually changed, especially as technology advances, because things change very quickly and not every problem can be anticipated in that way.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point because things can happen, and you're right. It's not malicious. They want to serve you. They want to serve you. Right. They want you to be happy because you keep coming back. But stuff happens. And another thing that I know, and it also happened to me, is that most of the things that happen that we don't want were miscommunicated on our end because we assumed that they understood what we said. And for example, I had one product that had a misspelling on the packaging. And for about 30 seconds, that's all it lasted, I was furious. And after those 30 seconds, I realized that the files that I sent them had the misspelling, right? So it came from me, or not, it was from my team. But again, so they, of course, they didn't go correct our mistake. It's not their job to correct a mistake. So all those prints that were wrong were my fault, my team's fault. And that kind of stuff happens, right? So in that case, I tracked the email that we had sent them with it was the AI files, and I saw that the mistake was from our end. But some sellers may not see that, and they are the ones, or buyers, they are the ones that are causing the mistakes sometimes, right? Not the factory.
Right. Yeah, communication is probably one of the weakest links in this situation, just because you might have multiple people involved. A little detail might have been overlooked. So that is one way how, what we mentioned, an approved sample can help with. The approved sample is like a universal language. You can see everything put together, because sometimes when you have files here and there, it can be easy to miss how they might fit together. So if you can get them to send you a sample complete with even like the packaging, sometimes you can be able to maybe catch some of those things in advance. But yeah, those mistakes do happen.
So this is, I promise, this is the last one.
Yeah.
What if that sample is defective. Is that the end of it? Because I assume if they're going to send me a sample, they're going to send the best quality they can make. If the sample sucks, that's the end of it there, or should you insist on getting another one?
Yeah, not necessarily. Because like some buyer, whether Amazon seller or not, it depends on how you communicated your requirements to them. Because someone will say, I want this pen and I want it to be good quality. That honestly doesn't mean anything. You've got to specify every material, every measurement, every color, and communicate that to them. Because a lot of factories are capable of pretty much the full spectrum of quality. So you got to make sure that you tell them exactly what you want. One way you can kind of deal with this, like if they send you a sample and you don't like it, and you don't want to wait, another couple of weeks for another sample, you can also have a sample sent to, the local inspection company's office. Send it to our office. We do, photographs, videos, function checks, and verify, through, let's say, video call, different files. That's one way to address that problem if you don't want to wait for, overseas shipping and things like that. So if you have a situation like that, you're not exactly sure how to handle it. There's no harm in, visiting, inspection company websites or sending an email to see what's the best option for addressing this problem. And usually you can figure out something that'll be able to fix the problem and not cost you so much time and energy.
Beautiful. Mitch, I promised that was the last one. So tell everybody that's interested where they can find VTrust, where they can find you. What links do you want to give out?
Sure. Yeah, we've got our website, as you know, v-trust.com, VTrust. We also have, social media pages, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. We like to publish QC related things as well, time to time. So we publish blog articles, videos, like how we check different items, things to watch out for. So if people like to follow us on LinkedIn or something, they can benefit from those. And you can also send us an email, info@vtrust.com. We're happy to help you out.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And I'll have them on the show notes for everybody that's listening and that's driving right now or running on the treadmill or in the shower. I will have those links on the show notes for you. I promise.
Sounds great. Appreciate it.
Mitch, thank you so much for this. This is fantastic. And I know that there's so much that I could ask, but I know we got to go. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for the opportunity. We really appreciate you taking the time to have us on your show.
Thank you.